Welcome to the MSF Mentoring and Coaching Podcast, a space where we gather to explore the transformative journey of mentoring and coaching. Join our guests and community of mentors and coaches into meaningful dialogues that ignite personal discovery and foster a sense of belonging, where we can learn and grow together. So, grab a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin.
So welcome everyone. We are here at a podcast, a new podcast that we launch on the topic of intercultural awareness, culture in coaching, and also how inclusion and diversity, what role they play in our coaching and mentoring practice. My name is Irene Janci. I'm based in MSF Austria. My background is in communications and I'm a coach with MSF since 2020. And I'm here with three wonderful guests, Casey, Patrice, and Nestle. Casey, please, over to you. Would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Irene, and really happy to be here. My name is Casey O'Connor. My pronouns are she, they, and I've been working with MSF since 2011, primarily in our project and project countries. As project coordinator, deputy head of mission, and more recently, actually in 2019, I went through the coach training in Norway with Irene, and right now I am the project lead for the LGBTQI inclusion in our health settings. And so that's been a really significant journey for me, and also seeing how we can address the barriers to healthcare for our LGBTQI patients. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more from you about those topics. Nestle, would you introduce yourself next, please?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nestle Sonko. I'm the current interim deputy staff director for Operational Center in Amsterdam. I'm Filipino-Australian by background, and I've been working with MSF since 2010 within the emergency unit, working in the field, in various positions within the partner section, but also mostly in HR. Thank you very much, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Nestle. Good to have you here. And over to Patrice.
Thank you, Irene, and I'm Patrice Vastel. So I'm coordinator for the Hub on Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities in MSF. I have a background as anthropologist and engineer, and I started in MSF in 1993. I worked in different projects with MSF during along around 9 years, and became general director for MSF Norway for another next 9 years before leaving MSF for a few years and working for a Norwegian organization specialized in development aid for persons with disabilities. And I am myself hard of hearing, so what brought me to particularly the topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, and inclusion of persons with disabilities in particular. And also I am a coach and a mentor, so since 2017 and very happy to combine these two aspects, important aspects in MSF, so of diversity, equity, inclusion, and also coaching and mentoring. I think it's an excellent combination. So very much looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Patrice. So we are here today to discuss how intercultural awareness shows up in coaching and mentoring. And I would like to start with you, Patrice. As you have also a background as anthropologist, so I'm sure you did a lot of thinking and reflection and reading on culture, intercultural relations, intercultural awareness. So in your opinion, what do we even mean by it, and how is it linked to coaching?
So thanks a lot, Irene. So I think we all have an idea of what cultural awareness is about. It means being sensitive to the difference and the similarities between two cultures when we communicate and when we interact. And I would like, in fact, today to go to a step further on that. I think for me, I would like more to raise awareness, to be careful also about cultural awareness, and to raise somewhere the issue of the danger of cultural awareness, because precisely when we talk about cultural awareness, then we imagine these cultural groups and we have this idea that we put people in a box with different labels. So you are from Italy, so you like spaghetti, to make it very caricatural. And there is really a massive danger on that, from which we can really learn a lot, meaning what we do is typically making assumptions, and we know how much and everybody working on diversity, equity, inclusion will definitely recognize this, how much assumptions are extraordinarily dangerous when it comes to inclusion. So for me, I will recognize the importance of cultural awareness, and at the same time really raise attention, be very careful how you use this cultural awareness. And I would almost prefer to talk about identity awareness. So basically recognizing we are all a common humanity, and that is what makes also MSF, and that is this common recognition of a common humanity. And also at the same time, we are all different, and every individual is different and shaped by different factors of identity. So we are all influenced by the different societies where we grow, by different groups, by different people, by different environments that we interacted with. We may be blind or deaf and have our own culture also linked with this. We may be part, and Keizé will probably also mention it, part of different communities that shape us also and contribute to our identity. We have the culture of our organization. So shaped with all these different factors, I think we are all unique, and we all move inside a unique world. So my main message when it comes to cultural awareness would be careful with cultural awareness, avoid and be very careful to not put people in boxes and making assumptions. And basically my core message would be assumptions equals danger, and that is where I could leave it here.
Very nice introduction. Thank you, Patrice. Casey, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Patrice said, particularly about not making assumptions about folks from cultures different from ours, and even from cultures that are the same as ours, in terms of how people identify. And yes, I mean, we are a multicultural organization, and, for those of us who are international mobile staff that go present ourselves into different cultures, how are we entering into that realm with, with assumptions, or with curiosity or respect, or, needing to reflect on our own cultural biases. If everybody thinks that, if you come from Italy, you need to eat spaghetti, then what kind of harm might that assumption be making for somebody who's gluten intolerant and can't have spaghetti, who's also Italian, to be very basic about the issue. And I think that there is a need for like a genuine sort of respect and curiosity when we're stepping into a different culture. And there are, you know, certainly for the work that I'm doing, there is also this assumption that something is normal versus not normal, like heteronormative society is normal, and sexual orientation, diverse sexual orientation identities are not normal. And so so I think that cultural awareness also begins with a huge dose of respect for other people, their identities, and how their culture impacts their belief systems, etc. And what I like to maybe emphasize is bringing a humility, a respect, and a curiosity into these situations, and staying away from the assumptions, as Patrice was saying.
Thanks, Casey. A lot of things resonate a lot, I think, with all of us. Nestle, I would like to hear from you, your thoughts on what was said so far.
I mean, I think as much as obviously it's a lot about understanding, getting to know each other, mutual respect, I think cultural awareness holds also a certain value, given also as much as we want to find commonality with each other, I think it's also very important then to respect those differences. And especially with cultures that have been maybe, let's say, traditionally colonized, let's put it this way, where potentially I'm of Filipino ethnicity with different backgrounds. One would say I'm somewhat Americanized because of the colony and the upbringing that I've had, but culturally there's far more to me than that. But those are some of the cultural identity that I have, whether I struggle with it or I celebrate it, that quite often, sometimes within a work environment or within MSF alone, is either, we are a French organization and suddenly we need to be comfortable with debate. But no, that's not part of my culture. That's not how I was brought up. Does that mean I don't belong, or does that mean it's wrong? So I think having those platform and openness to understand that your culture is different than mine, and where can we find the middle ground? And sometimes I think we go to the extreme, where in Europe it's hard to celebrate Christmas because we don't want to offend people. But if you're in an Islamic country, we celebrate Eid. So sometimes it's that duality that I struggle sometimes within MSF, that how far do we go with respecting each other culture, and where does then the inclusion comes in? And if we look at it within the world of coaching as well, I mean, like I said, for me, my coaching experience and my journey, I've seen coaching from a very westernized perspective, because our education of coaching has been purely from a Western perspective. So for me, I also want to celebrate the cultural aspect because I think it holds a certain power. And again, we're not talking about discrimination, microaggressions, and everything that comes in between. But I think there's a power in celebrating that cultural awareness and differences as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Leslie. So much was said. I wanted to add also to that, coming back to what you said, Patrice, this, yes, absolutely, avoiding putting people into boxes. And a very traditional way of looking at intercultural awareness does that, saying, I know how the Chinese or the Russians or the Austrians function and how they are, which certainly we cannot say. On the other hand, there are differences, as Nestle just very well pointed out. So how do we deal with that? Where's that line where we say we don't want to put people into boxes, but we know there are different communication styles. There are different ways of also approaching seeing oneself as part of a community, or rather as an individual. How do we navigate that in coaching? And let me give you one example. Just the fact of in coaching, as we learned it in our training, Casey, if you remember, we were taught like sometimes you have to interrupt the coachee when the person talks and talks. Just step in and bottom line or point to a question that comes to your mind. This might be, or it's my assumption now, more acceptable for people from some cultures than for others. It might feel quite more intrusive for some than for others. How do we deal with that in a coaching setting? Casey?
Can I respond? I think this is a really interesting question, and I'm going to bring up another aspect of this. When we have international teams, so, I mean, talking about the international teams living together, working together, et cetera, and what is that culture then? What's the dominant culture? Is the dominant culture who's the PC, who's the MTL, or or what? Because I think that can be have quite a lot of influence on other international team members coming from different cultures. I struggled with this several times in my coaching, where in order to be successful or deemed successful, people were feeling like they had to take on some of the aspects of, maybe even the colonizer, to use your reference, Nestle, that there were certain aspects of doing your job that were more valued. Debate being one, how you are in meetings, how you confront people, etc. And I think it's a real struggle within coaching to validate the person, respect their culture, and answer their sort of request for how to navigate with, maybe even your supervisor who comes from a different culture and is using their comfort and, with their own culture to say, this is how things need to be done when it might not be your style. And so I think that becomes a very tricky minefield for people that come from other cultures, aren't used to some of the core competencies that MSF might value that are not universal.
Patrice, how would you react to that to a situation like that in a coaching setting?
So working on diversity, equity, inclusion, when I hear and listen to us, the word that comes to my mind is basically equity. And that resonates very strongly when I hear us talking and when I hear these examples. And I think equity is very much unknown, misunderstood, and misused and unrecognized in MSF. And everywhere generally, I think we have generally an approach of fairness in terms of equality, meaning we give everyone the same thing and everyone should deliver the same thing. That's basically how things should work. And somehow we decide what we give also on top of that. So, and that is very much the idea of fairness linked with equality. And fortunately, I think diversity, equity, inclusion brings the idea of equity. And that means that what we must ensure is that every individual will get what they need to give their best. And I think that's how I can best define equity. And when I think about coaching, it's really that resonates. Like when we talk about management, is really what can we provide, how can we interact together so that our coachee can get can be able to provide his best. So for me, it's really about recognizing the individuality of everyone, and that everyone needs this customized approach, and that each dance, as we say, between each discussion, each dance between coach and coachee is unique and is linked to that relation. So for me, I found very interesting to bring this idea of equity, and it's very important because in many parts of the coaching we learned, there are kind of standard tools, and these standard tools, everyone thinks, okay, let's apply these beautiful tools that may be extraordinarily aggressive for some people, maybe exactly what some other people need, but we have to be able to really question these tools and have the dialogue with our coaches. Okay, what do you need? In fact, what do you think of that tool? What would work with you? So we need at the beginning of a coaching relation and all along the way, this dance together, not only on the content, but also on what works. In fact, how can we customize our relation together? And I think we don't do it enough, and we should really think about this idea of equity and not think everyone needs the same thing. So really customize our relation together. That's what I would like to bring that point.
Can I follow on just a little bit on that, which is some of the problem that I see in that, Patrice, is that, you know, I think equity versus equality is a really good thing to understand. But that when working with a coachee, they're working in a particular environment. And so the equity may not exist within that environment. And so you have to work with them in possibly an inequitable environment. And so that might mean different strategies.
And I would like to add the question to that. How much is it the role of the coach, in your opinion, to maybe flag to the coachee or to point it out that it's a question of equity they are facing, or it's not there's no equity in their work situation?
I think it's absolutely something to point out in coaching. I mean, you want to validate their experience as well. And if that means naming what you see, then I certainly would do that.
The others agree? Nestle, what do you think?
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's the ideal, right? I think just to be a bit of a devil's advocate in that sense is then at which point do we also become realistic in saying with certain things we can only achieve equality with certain things, because I think equity is always the most ideal, but in every organization where our resources can be limited, budgets are being cut, how much do we really have and how much do we have in ourselves or the capacity and the competency within the organization to really achieve that? And what would be for us then the bare minimum, just to put it out there? Because in a lot of our DEI ambitions, the problems are huge and can be very complex. And I think a lot of people get so lost in it. So therefore, for me, when we talk about equity, equality, sometimes it's also going to the basics of what do we mean by it? Because what's equity for you is very different for me. And I think that is often the challenge. Even equality for you is very different for me. But at the same time, what would the organization want to provide or can provide to its employees and staff?
So we're coming to the end of the first segment. And I would like to ask you, Patrice, what are your thoughts on equity? What are your thoughts on equity? And what are your thoughts on equality? And what are your thoughts on equity? 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 And what are your thoughts on equ And I think we did a very interesting, like also framing the what we speak about and what we mean. Any last thoughts on what concretely this means for our coaching practice? Supporting the coachee in finding or standing up for his or her equity, seeing the situation they might face for what it is, not putting people into boxes, and at the same time being aware that certain differences exist and that coaching in itself has its bias from where it comes from or from the tools it uses. What does this concretely mean for our practice? And maybe a short example or intervention from each of you. Patrice?
Yes, for me, it's I always come back a bit to this diversity, equity, inclusion. So we didn't mention so much inclusion, in fact, while it was, in fact, behind the discussion. And our concern, I think, is also to create an inclusive coaching environment. And we know that inclusion is about not only accepting the diversity, but making sure that everyone has the possibility to be part of the discussion. That is what inclusion is about. So when it comes to a coachee and coach relationship, for me, it's very much about really learning from each other, learn from your coachee, and your coachee can learn from you, and we learn together from this relation. So for me, inclusion is really a beautiful term when it comes to coaching, because it's about really learning from each other, learning together. I will stop there.
And that's a very good link to what we discuss next. So keep your thoughts, your additional thoughts on it. We are going to come back to that. Casey, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that I would say that the coach needs to make sure that they don't underestimate getting an understanding of the cultural frame within which the coachee is operating. And that might take a little bit more information gathering, etc., in order to create at least some small understanding. But ignoring that would be at their peril, or probably at the coachee's peril.
I think for me is just ask. I think use that natural curiosity either as a coach or encourage your coachee, because I think that's also part of the trust building in a relationship where there's no judgment. It doesn't matter what culture, gender, etc. you are. It's about you and the coachee and you as a coach. Curiosity is a powerful thing to have, so use it. I leave it there.
Thanks very much, Nestle. It's a very good last word for before we go into a short break and then come back with the next questions.
As we wrap up this episode of MSF Mentoring and Coaching Podcast, we want to extend our gratitude to each and every one of you who's been part of this enriching conversation. Keep nurturing those mentoring relationships, keep honing your coaching skills, and keep striving for meaningful connections. Until next time, stay inspired and keep making a positive impact in the world.